government thinks it very prudent that we have this reviewed and incorporated in the new agreement before we have it automatically renewed.
The Vice Chairperson of UWEA, an organization that brings together labor export companies, says the suspension of such agreements needs extra time and preparation for stakeholders.
It was unfair, and I was somehow a brief of the DOA to terminate immediately the operations, including those who are traveling, those who are in training, those who are under process, including the borders as well.
Like we've not been briefed before, we had a number of trainings at the center. We had 200 trainings yesterday, and we didn't know how to react or how to break the news to them.
Uganda exports over 10,000 migrant workers every month, with the current suspension affecting many unemployed youth that have been seeking employment opportunities from abroad.
I'm going to work in Saudi Arabia. I get my money, I save it, I come and buy a plot, I build, I set my business.
Saudi Arabia
Saudi Arabia is the only country that Uganda has stable externalization contracts with after the suspension of Jordan. Helen Mugeni, NBS, Live at 9.
Well, we're now joined by Abdallah Kayonde, the president of Migrant Workers. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Shana.
So we've had different stakeholders have their take, and you also represent those that have been affected. Let's start with the suspension of the agreement. What does this really mean for the sector?
The suspension actually was made in a panic, and it was not necessary because we were getting close to the completion of the agreement. Therefore, it wasn't necessary. And even the way it was communicated was such threatening, and the decision was such monopolistic that the administrators in labor did not consult, did not actually engage the people who are supposed to be affected by this very decision. So in one way, it is affecting the industry in terms of the exports being paralyzed, as in if you don't organize yourself when you are passing out such a sensitive information, you may end your own in the hands of traffickers, and also panicking those who are trying to carry or get into the right channels. So it's really very bad, and it shouldn't be repeated. If it must be done, consultations have to be taken, or even it can be communicated through amicable channels by consulting the stakeholders and also the workers.
So we'll get into the consultation, but I noticed that you used the word panic twice. What's this panic about? Who was panicking? Why were they panicking?
Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development.
So why were they panicking?
They panic their aim, in my view, is to put the migrant workers on the hook. As in, when they pass such a quick decision or a quick announcement, even at the end of this agreement, everybody knows that this agreement was about to end this year. Why are you panicking to put everyone on standstill if you are not intending to call for the mercy of these migrant workers who are suffering, that have been yelling, crying for you to give them the support they need, and you haven't turned up to their mercy, to their outcries. So you coming up with such a decision means you want them to keep crying for you that you have put a ban, therefore they cannot go back to Saudi Arabia, so they should shut up and don't complain again. This is the intention. So, but psychologically for us, we can know their intentions, and these games must stop, in our opinion.
Interesting. Let's talk numbers. About how many planned migrant workers are going to be affected by this?
Around, according to the statistics, you see that Saudi Arabia alone, the Saudi embassy, the ambassador was giving us the numbers of the visas they were issuing, around 200,000 Ugandans being residing in Saudi Arabia as workers. Such people can be affected by this kind of decision, if at all the suspension goes for long. These people may lack a proper way, a proper way to be followed up, even be supported. We may say there was no support at all, if at all the very bilateral failed to implement the Joint Technical Committee, which is Article 6 in the very bilateral. So when it comes to this decision, if you had not instituted the Joint Technical Committee, which you must leave on ground to cater for those already in contracts, why would you then suspend? So you find that many people, around 200,000 Ugandans, will be affected, including those in Uganda.
Those who are waiting.
Yes, those who are
might be
waiting, in waiting. Those in thousands, around 10,000 are leaving, monthly. So you find many people are also hooked onto the same project of labor export. The tailors, all those people attached to training centers, they all earn a living using this. So they may be affected in the same way. So such a communication was not really fitting for the time.
Okay, let's look at the reason for the suspension, regardless of of the sentiments around it. What we're meant to understand is that the authorities in Saudi failed to live up to the expectations of the Ugandan government. What are these expectations, to be exact?
No, Ministry of Gender is cowardizing. They are cowardice because those such a move would be brought by Saudis, threatening, maybe not wanting the Ugandans. But why the Ugandans complain for 5 years, calling for your support as a Ugandan government, and then you wait for 4 days to the end of the agreement, you come up with a suspension? Why didn't you suspend before if you are strong enough? So there is a big question. They are cowards. I mean, the cowards, they cannot stand their ground to protect their own overseas.
So if they had consulted the stakeholders like you proposed, what would, you're part of the stakeholder group, what advice would you give?
Would advise them to, first of all, include everyone, to always take decisions after listening to our voices, because we are the ones on ground. It is not them to suffer, unless they want to turn into cattle keepers. And then we shall be ready to wait for their, sticks. But if not that, if we were to advise them, they should listen more and include us into the whole process, such that we can not keep in the blaming as workers. We have always kept in the blaming the other side. Why not we always being party to the decisions taken? This is one thing, if we were being consulted. And another thing concerning the issues on ground, we were supposed to be taken care of by the monitoring committee or the monitoring system, which is not funded. So we are left there. So if we are not party into this, and yet we have a jurisdiction the other side, the people who are supposed to be monitoring us don't have a jurisdiction. So we would advise them to involve us, to have a recommendation in the authorities of Saudi Arabia to be always available for our own.
Abdallah Kayonde, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Now, Abdallah Kayonde is the president of Migrant Workers and was joining us tonight to speak on the suspension of the bilateral labor agreement between Uganda and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And this Live at 9 takes a break and returns shortly.